the hospital, you may not know that, Dave Block.
Exactly. That's
Apparently
what
a respiratory problem,
Sounds like it.
so it must be going around.
And I guess under HIPAA, we should probably talk about that.
Well, then I won't mention what I was
Well,
gonna mention
he's
about.
not here because.
Here comes David. All right. So, let's get started, and it probably makes sense before we get started is to do the oaths, since the mayor since the mayor's here.
I don't.
You want to do the honors?
Mayor, here's you have Ken's there. And I did this individually, you don't have to do it this way, but I did it individually. So all that has to happen is as you could all read it aloud
Right.
together, and you
Now,
all have your
let's
cheat
do that. Let's raise our right hand and repeat after me. I have been duly appointed to the 2014 Charter Review Commission of the City of Macedonia, do solemnly swear to uphold the Constitution and laws of the United States, the Constitution and statutes of the State of Ohio, and the Charter and codified ordinances of the City of Macedonia, and shall perform the duties of a Charter Review Commissioner to the best of my ability and understanding, so help me God. Good job.
Yeah, we're,
Thanks.
okay, wait, I think you get to sign these then, Mayor.
I'll make sure he gets this.
All right.
All right. So we'll give them back to Josephine. Josephine, why don't you keep Ken's until next week? Then, Mr. McLarino and myself can swear him in.
And then if you all want copies of them, I can make sure.
Okay, good. Mr. Mayor, are you here because of the subject matter, or are you here, you wanted to say something before we got started? Or you just come here to wish us good tidings and a Merry Christmas?
Well, thank you for the courtesy of allowing me to speak. I'm here strictly tonight to be here in case you would have any questions for me, any comments. What you're going to be going over is the duties of the mayor, and I thought it would be nice if I would be handy if you wanted to ask a question. One of the things I would like to say is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I think having our mayor and council form of government, in my opinion, works. But we need to remember that there has to be a difference between administrative and legislative. And that's all I have to say. So have a good meeting, and I'm here if you need me.
Okay, we appreciate that. I think the way we planned we were gonna do this is not necessarily read every line verbatim. I think we all hopefully did a little reading between now and the last meeting, and I think we should, if everybody's in agreement, why don't we start it?
Well, I think what you're gonna do is, you would like to speak to any department heads who are here.
Oh, well, that's
Otherwise,
right.
Mr. Black would be sitting here for the whole
I
time.
thought Mr. Black was just here because he
And
gets
he
thrown out of his house.
pizza.
Okay, Tim.
And regarding the department heads, I have not heard from any of the others,
Okay,
and I have not received anything in writing from any of the others, but they
Okay.
were all invited.
Great.
So if you heard from
Thank you.
anyone,
okay,
You're inviting them.
right.
Yeah.
Jim, thanks for coming. You wanna slide up, that's fine.
I can.
You
that's
wanna
okay.
sit here and Mr. Martin's
Any of
here?
those things that are.
No, he's in the hospital.
Well, yeah, but he wasn't, he didn't sit there before you went in. Man, be salty for that.
I got out Sundays.
Yeah, why were you
I
wearing
got out
that?
of the hospital Sunday. I'm glad I'm here.
Did you see
Yeah.
Ken in the passage?
Yeah,
We didn't cross paths. I didn't even know he was in. I was okay.
I'm glad you're feeling better.
His flu is rough, so
It is.
it's a tough one. It's a tough one. I really don't have, I mean, I scoured through the charter and I don't have anything, you know, I wanted to come in case there was any questions for me, but I didn't see anything that was glaring to me that I felt needed to be changed in the way of the fire department.
Okay,
So,
well,
see
you're
anything.
you're a department head, and obviously you know a lot about the city. Did you see anything that in other parts of the charter that you thought were significant and maybe needed a tweak or two?
No, I did not, you know, I went through and I didn't see anything that glared at me. You know, specifically, I looked at the fire department, but I did not see anything else. I know that you had touched base on the safety director, and it, you know, because we're under that, police and fire are under that. And I think it's rather clear, you know, it says that, you know, if, at the time that that's needed, that council and the mayor can confirm that appointment. So, I mean, it's already there.
Okay.
So I didn't think that there was any changes needed there. It's available if sometime into the future that wants to be done, so.
Okay.
I
All right.
don't see anything in that aspect. Civil service? Yeah, I read through civil service, I didn't,
All right, good.
saw nothing.
All right, I appreciate it, Tim. Thanks for coming.
Made you work a little bit harder and came up with something fun, but man, I just didn't see anything.
We didn't need
I
extra
didn't
work.
see any problems that we have, you know, currently with the department or anything like that, so.
Okay, very good. So, let's, can we go on then, Josephine? Did I promise to do anything else that
No,
I
I
forgot
just
about?
thought if you start doing it, and he's just sitting here, he could sit here.
Yeah, that's fine. We're pretty entertaining. All right, well, I think we said we were gonna try to talk about Articles 1, 2, 3, and 4 tonight. Unless we wanna change the name of the city, or, I had proposed a couple years ago invading Northfield Center. Nobody seemed too happy about that idea. I assume everybody's happy with Article 1. Mayor, you wanna change the name of the city to anything?
No, thank you, my
Okay.
name's already in there.
All right, so, then Article 2, which is the powers of the municipality. Joe, do you have any thoughts on that, or,
You know, it's pretty standard.
okay? Peggy?
No, I don't have any recommendation on there, but I would like to make sure that Joe Deemer looks at it one time, just to make sure. I know there's, the General Assembly's been eroding the power of local governments over the time and taking away home rule. I don't know if there's any amendments that need to be made to that language, but once Joe looks at it and makes a recommendation to us, we're good.
All right, I'll send Joe an email and see if he has any comments, and, I'll report back to you guys, as soon as I hear, probably next meeting, okay? I'm trying to write notes. Powers of the
Yeah.
municipality, she wanted me to check with Mr. Deemer to see if there needs to be any changes based on what the legislature
Yeah.
has done to home rule, which we probably all feel the same about. Okay, let's go on to Article 3, the mayor. I'm gonna make a wild guess that election and term is not an issue, but if anybody has any thoughts about Article 3,
I do, Dave.
Mr. Deemer, or excuse me, Mr. LaParo, shout out and tell me what it is.
Some of these that I've been on this committee for years, we put in not realizing the change of people, time and date. So basically, under 302 qualifications, and then nothing to do with you, Don, shall be a continuous resident qualified elected of the city. Now, 2 years prior, what does that really mean? Now, here's the reason I said this has happened before. I could be gone a year from Macedonia, but I've been here before that, and it's 2 years prior. Does that mean you gotta be a continuous resident 2 years prior to the date of, see, that ain't what it says there. I've had this,
We've already had that issue debated in, over somebody who actually had a situation very similar, who ran for mayor at one time, actually. And was it council?
I think it was Mr. Walmer, yeah.
Yeah, about being a continuous resident. I think it's a continuous residence for 2 years prior to the
but
time of
I
the
understand,
election.
Joe, but what does that actually mean legally? This can be challenged by law. I'm saying is, if that's what you wanna say, if you wanna run for mayor this year, like, 2 years is 300, how many days is 2 years? So if you wanna run for mayor, it should say that you'd have to live here 675 days before the election. So that would actually clear this up, because this really can be challenged. And I goofed, I was on the committee when they put this on years ago, not realizing there was an incident. So I think somebody should really look at this and make it simple, because if it could come up and you can have a legal challenge again. And why spend all the time and money when let's, just make it simple.
So let's define what we mean by 2 years of continuous service.
Right.
So as long as you're a registered voter for 2 years, or you have established permanent residency
Well,
here
that's
for
what I'm
2
saying
years,
is, what
does that mean?
what does it really mean?
Do you have a suggestion as to how to change it to?
All I'm saying is, if, I have had my legal way to look at it too. If say the election is this November, okay? Count back 2 years, which is how many days?
365 times 2.
But you gotta remember, one of them has got a leap year in it too.
Okay.
That's, see, so that's what I'm saying, if you take 365 and 365, that comes to 730, right? So I would say, if you put 730 in there, when leap comes in there, you run into trouble. So I would say, like, you must be living here 731 days before the election date. Nobody can challenge that. I mean, I'm just letting you know what, I've checked it out.
Do we know, has anybody heard of other charters that may have handled that differently and spell it out to the day, like Mr. Leparo's suggested? Joe, have you ever heard of anything?
No, I haven't really researched it, so I really don't know.
I have language here from the city of Twinsburg. Mayor of the city shall be a qualified elector of the city and shall have resided therein for a period of at least 2 years,
Of at least.
and shall reside therein continuously during their term. I don't know if that would be an acceptable alternative to what you're suggesting, perhaps.
But see, that's what I'm saying, we have to define, what we're saying is that word prior.
I don't disagree with you, Chuck. I think you're making a very good point. Here's what I'm thinking about, though. Are we going to take and try to modify that language and put it in front of the voters? Is it that important, or has it been okay the way it's been for as
Let's
long
hear
as
it,
it's
there's
been?
been a challenge at one time, I'm saying,
Then maybe it'll be challenged. Maybe. I mean, is that such a bad thing? I mean, you seem to already have the answer to if it's challenged, what the answer is. So, I mean, if I wanted to challenge it, you're probably the guy I'd come to be able to win the challenge. But do we want to,
but you also understand, no matter what we put on the ballot,
I
the
think
voters
yeah.
are gonna decide one way or the other.
Right, well, so are we, I think, as a group.
Yeah.
I guess, so I guess my suggestion would be is if you feel strongly about it, we need to come up with the language for it and put it on our list of things, and then we'll eventually vote on it. Decide whether it should go to the voters or not.
What was the issue with Miller and Molnar? When Miller had to get an attorney and spend money because this was not,
I think the issue was, Nick had lived here as a child and probably as a young adult, but then for a while he didn't actually live in Macedonia. And then he came back, I don't know, I think his job took him somewhere else.
Yeah.
And when he came back the second time, he hadn't been here the full 2 years.
that's,
So the ruling, however, it came out at the, I think the Board of Elections did the ruling, did they?
I think so, but I also think that it's kind of like what happens when you do go away to college. You technically do establish residency if you go away, especially if you're out of state, but you're technically still, your parents might still live here.
Yeah.
And if someone who's 21 graduates from college in June and he wants or she wants to run for office in November,
Well, according to the Board of Elections, all right, if I'm in college, but I use my address here as my mailing address, that's where I live.
I know, but what if you don't? What if you decide to get an apartment on campus or off campus?
Then you don't
But
live
you see what I'm saying, but don't forget the state reps, unless they changed it. If you're running for the House, you don't have to live, you have to live there 30 days. I mean, county council, 30 days. I mean, it's kind of,
I find that disgusting.
but, I mean, it's not, it's, anyway, it's just an option that you can you get elected if you've only lived here 30 days? Probably not. If you lived here your whole life and went away to college and came back and you get elected, probably. So, you know, I think it's an issue that we might wanna consider, but I'd hate to see us put all these like 40 items on the ballot when we really only wanna focus on 10, because.
Well, no, I said that because being on this committee when it first started, some of these issues we never thought about when we did it in them days. And like I said, we had a couple of incidents, and I really don't think an incident will come up. But my question, if it ever did in the next 4 years, why does the city have to spend money if somebody sues, you know, because it's so, that's just my checking.
Well, let me ask the question, and not, it's not specifically addressing Nick or what he's done on council, but how do you feel about, let's say somebody lives here 20 years, then they move away for 10 years, and they're not in college, they're working, they're living in San Francisco, and then something happens and they move back and they're here 6 months, and then they decide I wanna run for council.
I don't think they should,
What do you think
because
of
they
that?
really don't know,
They don't qualify.
no, they don't know what's been going on the last year.
Yeah, but it
Just
says,
reading what Jennifer
but I think part of the issue with the Mueller-Miller fight was, I think, no one from the city opposed his running. Isn't that what they said?
No, actually what
Oh, you had
happened,
something?
if you'll indulge me,
I'm trying.
they discussed this during the last one. What had happened was Mr. Mulner was 25 days short, but his contention was that he had, who else went to high school. Mike Miller, an incumbent, filed a protest with the Board of Elections. The board, however, chose to take no action on the issue. Macedonia City Council also chose to take no action on the issue. Mr. Miller filed a lawsuit. The court ruled, however, that Mr. Miller filed late for the issue to be heard. The board held that it was too late to remove Mr. Miller's name because the ballots had been printed. For lack of action by the board, council, and the court, Mr. Miller remained on the ballot. The resident requirement was another issue. Macedonia's history, this was 1987. For the mayoral election, this had to do with and he went before the Board of Elections, and that's noted here. So that was really the issue that the board filed, determined it was too late.
Did the board say there was another?
No, Mrs. Reagan alluded to the fact that there was another issue in 1987, if you'll indulge me.
Sure.
The resident requirement, the resident requirement was another issue, another time in Macedonia's history due to the 1987 mayoral election. But there was no challenge, no confusion about the meaning or intent of the sentence. Then Council Clerk Peggy Spriggans filed a protest with the Board of Elections stating that one of the candidates, Bruce Genevieve, did not meet Macedonia's 2 years residence requirement, therefore his name should be removed. The board's action scheduled a hearing. Ms. Spriggans appeared at the hearing. At the hearing, the board informed Ms. Spriggans that Mr. Genevieve had withdrawn his name because he understood, he did understand that he didn't know the city long enough. Two incidents, 2 different results. Would there have been no issue the last time if the sentence had been made more clear? Question.
He lived on Ledge Road, didn't he, Joe? Genevieve, yeah.
So apparently, you know, I mean, this was, they talked about it.
Interesting, all right. Well, thank you for the history lesson, I appreciate it. All right, well, I think it's something we probably should think about. Does anybody have any more discussion on it at this point, or is that how we normally do? We just kind of make a list and then try
Yeah,
to
like,
read it
we'll make a
down?
note of it,
Okay.
make a star.
Okay, I have one more under that, Dave.
Okay.
I've called the Attorney General, the auditors, everybody I can think of. What is 2/3 of 5? I've got 2 different, I'm trying to get a hold of the,
What section are you referring?
We're not there yet.
I think he's getting ahead of himself,
Yeah,
but I know.
2/3 affirmative vote it takes to for the mayor to, it's on a veto power, but that's what I'm
No,
saying.
we're not there yet. I
No,
don't-
no, that's
That's number 10 under 3.03.
number 11, under 303.
Okay.
It says 2/3 affirmative vote. Council may disaffirm by a 2, this is in everything, so.
This was dealing with
Appointment of department heads. or-
And that's also on the mayor's veto. But that's what I'm saying.
Yes.
I talked to the Attorney General, I've called the newspapers, I'm trying to get a hold of the math professor at Case Western Reserve.
I think we can do math.
Huh?
I think we can do math.
Well, no, what is 2/3 of 5?
10/3.
Hmm?
10/3.
No, if you divide it, it comes to like 3.333.
Right.
So that 333 is lower than that, so it should be 3, some say it's 4. So I've got two different rulings. I'm waiting for that person to give me a court ruling that I can stand up and say, hey, tell our law director you're wrong, because he says 2/3 is 3.
So your point is that some people round that up and some
People round it down.
Which is the correct way?
Right.
And should the language be changed to better define
Take
it?
the 2/3 out.
I think you have a good point again.
Well, I would, like I said, not that we made mistakes, I admit it, when we put these in, we never understand.
So what we could do is, on those situations, is clarify a number rather than a
All
percentage.
right, in other words, if you got 5, 3 is the majority, am I correct? If you got 6, it would be 4, right? If you got 7, it would be,
Right.
I'm just saying that because that 2/3 is when there was a big argument on council floor about it.
That comes out of the last charter review commission where charter council went from 6 to 5.
Aye.
And as part of the, I guess what we call enabling legislation, that's to try to straighten up all the numbers.
Yeah, there's,
Everything was changed from one fraction to another, except from a fraction to a number, except for 2 pieces, and they were this piece and then the veto. It was left at 2/3, and then when that became an issue of council earlier this year, Mr. Deemer did in fact bring some legal decision where the court said that if you don't define 2/3, it's 66.66666. But Mr. Deemer, it's my recollection, and I can inquire. I think he also said that that number could be defined in another way.
Well,
So you
Mr.
gotta-
Haslak said at the one meeting, his assistant, it was 4 on council floor.
Right, I understand, but I think they said it was 4 because there was no definition, but I thought someone at some point in time said council, or that could be defined as a different way.
Well, yeah, but Dave, see, the reason I'm saying that, under C, the same article, under veto powers, it said, the mayor may approve by a vote of 2/3 of council. Now, what happens if this isn't changed? If,
Well, let's talk about it, maybe just as a policy decision,
Yeah.
is taking all the percentages and making an actual number. So
Yes.
there's
correct,
no
that's what I'm
question
saying,
in
yes,
the
that's the reason I'm
future.
saying this
So
is,
we're all in agreement that 3 out of 5 is a majority,
There
right?
are-
Any
right.
dispute on that?
Right.
And then, so the only question is,
Yeah.
you either need, obviously, for anything, we need a majority. And then, right, you need a supermajority, or you
Suspension.
never, I don't think of anything that you would need 100%.
No.
So it would either
Overriding a
be,
veto, 4 to 5.
right, 4 to 5, it's not gonna be 100% for overriding a veto.
But that's closer to 80%.
I realize that,
Okay.
but we have 5, and so I think just clarifying as a policy, having a number would make future councils have a better understanding. That's all my thought.
So it'd be 3 out of 5
Well,
and 4 out
if
of
that's what we
6.
decide, we
That's
could
what we
make it
decide.
100% if we chose to, or make a recommendation to choose that. But I'm just saying if we can decide that, whenever we come across a percentage, we're just gonna do it a number
Can
as
I-
opposed to a percentage.
Can I say something, please? There are 13 different places in this charter where not only do we use numbers like 3 out of 5 or 4 out of 5, but they also use percentages in a few places or fractions in a few places, and all of them are completely inconsistent
You're
with
right.
the charter change that occurred from the 2009 that took effect last year. Okay, there's 13 of them. I mean, even amongst some of the items, like removal of office, it's inconsistent.
Some require a
some-
supermajority and some don't.
Right.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
the difference.
Well,
And how it
the
was-
point is there is a difference.
Yeah, and there is a difference.
For
between
each
majority.
each department head, you know, someone along the way decided that one department head was more important than another, so one required more votes than another to get rid of them. And personally, I think that should all be made consistent. And we should deal with this issue that Chuck has brought up about fractions by defining it and then letting the voters decide which way it should be.
Obviously, you've done a lot of research because you can tell me the number of 13. So I'm going to make the wild assumption that maybe you know where those 13 areas are in the
I do.
charter. Do you have a list?
Yeah, in fact, back in 2012, Rita drafted legislation to deal with this and never did anything.
Okay, would you,
Because she decided it needed to happen with the charter change, not with an ordinance.
Josephine, is your machine?
Yeah.
Why don't you pass that down, and why don't we make copies of it for everybody? And Josephine can keep a copy of it, and that's an interesting thing that we need to.
Don't quote me that that is all of them.
All right,
I
that's fine.
remember when she did that, and I made her dig a copy out for me because I knew we would be talking about this tonight.
All right.
I have a question. What is super majority? What is that? And when is it, in effect?
Go ahead, Peggy.
It depends on each community. They define it differently in all different communities, and even in the state law and the state legislature. It depends on if it's something, generally you need a majority to override the administration, which is pretty standard. And you would, in fact, I'm not aware of any legislation or any decision that a legislative body would have to have 100% in order to pass something. So there's only one choice for 5 council people. So it's not that difficult, I think, if you just look at it. It's either a majority or, you know, we'll call it a supermajority. So in those critical pieces, like a veto, because a veto is a very serious thing. The mayor generally will not veto something unless it's very important to him or his administration. So you would, and removal is a critical thing, so you would need a supermajority.
Well, can the topics of a supermajority be printed so that they just can't be?
Well, we could make any recommendation we want, but I do agree that we should be consistent. And I do agree that just because it makes it easier and less controversial in the future, putting a number in there rather than a percentage.
Well, I think it should be made easier for the regular folk that don't understand what all this,
Right.
Well, it
all
was
this
easy
stuff is.
before when it was 6, because 2/3 of 6 is 4, and anybody who went to 3rd grade can figure that out.
Well, I would disagree with you, Dave, because it wasn't consistent.
Well, I'm
The
not
areas
arguing
were
about it.
specifically changed along the way.
Alright.
And I don't know the history as to why, maybe there's legitimate reasons why. But the point is, some required 4 of 6, some required 5 of 6, some required 2/3.
I think it should be, well, I'd like to see it more consistent.
And it
Not
also,
just, I've never heard the word supermajority except one time.
well, there's,
And I was like, wait a minute.
She never finished this. She's
I want to also look at the ordinance to see if it's not a typograph. In other words, the ordinance that was
Okay. Well, I think
drafted, and
it's,
then the reproduction of the charter, see if it's not a typograph.
I think that it's worth looking at just to make sure we're consistent and then decide what to do. And since Josephine is our able-bodied secretary, you mind taking a look at that? And the rest of us should probably look at it too.
Say that again, I want this copy, just to refer,
Well, you
just
were,
to
you
see.
were,
No,
you were
it's
talking about
looking at the
ordinances.
original, looking at the original ordinance, see if it was a typographical error
Right.
in these sections.
Yeah,
to see.
and the rest of us at least need to look at the charter and let's try to, see what we got going here, okay?
What does it say something in here about a supermajority?
Charter, the supermajority is not a term that's used in the charter, that's just a term that people have made up
But
to
it is
describe.
used in state law.
It is,
The ORC has
Really?
supermajorities.
yeah,
But normally, I always think of a supermajority as 2/3, but is that what it is in the state law?
I don't, I'd have to look, but I
can't
know
imagine
that
they have
language
it.
is
it
in there.
requires more than just
A majority.
the majority, because otherwise, you know, you would,
If we
Right
start
along.
using that word, then we've got to define what that word means.
Yeah.
well, I'm
Real
having
time or
telling you,
4 or 5.
explaining why sometimes there are, like the suspension of rules, or you're asking that more votes are required because you don't want it all to be nilly void.
Okay.
I got one more, Dave, don't worry.
Can I just add one more thing?
Sure.
That add to, oh, okay, it is down there. It's, the 4.13, I was looking at the bottom, but it's at the top, the removal of a council member. And Dave picked it up, but in the last sentence on that section, it says the accused member when removing counsel doesn't get a vote. Well, of course they don't get a vote on their own removal, that makes sense. But then at the 4 lines above that, it says for the 5 remaining. Well, that would make it 100%.
Yeah.
Well, that's crazy. You would never want to make anything 100%.
Yeah, she.
I just skipped over, just because I wasn't sure if it was on, but it is, so.
All right, we'll,
Okay, go back.
we'll talk about that too, I think that's something important to talk about. Okay,
I still got one more thing.
all right, just one second, Chuck.
Okay.
We're gonna look at 3.11, anybody have any more comments on 3.11 before we hear Chuck's next issue?
3.11, oh, 3. Well, I have something to go back to 3.02,
Okay,
if we've already gone to 3.03.
all right, well, let's do with Chuck and then we're
Okay,
gonna go
that's
to you.
All right. Special elections. I talked to,
What section
What,
are you
what
on?
section?
that's under, same one below, it's the last one, any vacancies, a special election for the office of mayor.
Article section 1.
We're still under that same section 3.
Okay. The very last part
But
of it.
special elections comes up about 3 or 4 times in this charter. The reason I'm saying that, all right, and there was a problem involved, Joe, and our charter states that anytime you go from R1 to anything else, it must go on a regular scheduled election. So there was a dispute, is August a regular scheduled election?
Okay, hold on, Chuck, hold that thought. For those who are using Josephine's lined copy that's numbered,
Mhm.
it's line 277. Thanks, Chuck. We're just trying to keep up with you.
The
Okay,
copy Josephine gave has numbers. in
Pardon?
it.
It's awesome.
Josephine's copy has numbers, so
Oh.
if you look at the copy that she made, then you can tell us to look on 270 or 2.
well anyhow, the Board of Elections said, quote, and I got the information at home, and I should have brought it, May and November are regular scheduled elections. Anything else is a special election. August is a special election, okay? Our charter states that any rezoning from R1 to anything else must go on a regular schedule. It was, no offense, Joe, because he walked in council, handed him the check to pay for a regular scheduled election to rezone that. According to the charter, council shouldn't have allowed it, but they did. So that's what I'm saying is, we have to say a regular scheduled election, according to the Board of Elections, is May and November, period.
I don't think we have to say that. That's defined by the laws in the state of Ohio.
No. Then why did council and this administration, no offense to Joe, because he had a check for $10,000
I can tell
to
you.
have it rezoned, he walked up and gave council the money, he paid for the special election. It was a violation of the charter.
Okay. Okay.
Because somebody's gonna argue that August wasn't a special election.
So what would be a better term? A regular election, to be held in November or May, or what would be a better term?
According to the Board of Elections, a regular election is scheduled in May and November. Anything else is special.
Yeah.
But Chuck and I have disagreed about this for 4 years now.
I don't care if you disagree, call the Board of Elections.
But you just give me 5 minutes. I went out and I did some research. I'm not saying I'm a municipal attorney, but the research that I did, and I threw it away because I thought this was dead a long time ago, came to the conclusion that because we had allowed this type of elections for so long, and we've been having so many elections, that it qualified under the case law and under Ohio law, and that's why I voted to allow the election to take place. When did it take place? August?
It took place in August.
Yeah.
Dave, I won't disagree with you, okay, until somebody shows me a legal ruling, okay? I don't care who you check with, the Board of Elections and the Attorney General are the laws of the state. What happens in New York doesn't bother us. If there was a ruling in New York on that, New York's ruling don't.
No, it wasn't New York. I read the case law for Ohio.
All right, then I'd like to see it.
I'm not gonna redo it, so I don't think I still have it. It might be in my chart.
Well, no, if there's a case law, in other words, the Board of Elections and the Attorney General don't know what they're talking about. So if you show me that document, I'll go call them lawyers.
No, they're giving you the definition, but I'm telling you that because of prior, practice, the court law, which would overrule says it's a special election, it works as well for this, and it doesn't have to be, on the November board.
Dave,
We can address that issue later.
line 277
Right.
has to do with the vacancy of the office of mayor.
Right.
And I think that council should have the right to have an election whenever it seems appropriate. And it just says in here about the special election that the mayor, if they have a special election and the council president doesn't lose their seat, I don't think there's an issue with that. But the rezoning issue that Chuck is bringing up, I think is in Article 17 or something way back in the charter. Let's revisit that, because I think they're totally separate things
I agree.
relative to special and regular elections.
All right, so that makes sense to me, but then the question is, that we're talking at 277, what's your thoughts then? Let me read it.
Where's the other?
277, and the last one is under 10, section 10, the zoning.
Oh, is it check?
Yeah, I think it's
Okay.
10
All
or
right, let's just keep
something like
with
that.
3 point, must be 3.4, is that what this would be?
Yes,
3.04.
304, absence of vacancy.
Okay, all right.
That's kind of interesting the way that they changed that. The election for zoning changes is gonna be held concurrently with the next election regularly scheduled throughout the county.
This vaguely,
689 is
Let's
the
skip,
line
I know,
number.
but let's skip that, let's push that back, let's kind of concentrate on this, because that's rezoning thing.
all right, I agree, let's not talk about zoning right now, let's just talk about it. As I'm reading line 274 through 280, it vaguely gives me, isn't this what happened when
Yes.
Joe resigned and Barb came on, and then there was the question as to whether or not it had to be a special election?
And council chose not to do anything, because it was a cost factor in August,
Right.
so they waited until November, but technically they should have acted.
And in the meantime, though, Barb was able to keep her council seat, there was no vacancy on council.
Exactly.
And that was, I think, what this is.
So she could vote on council and still be.
I don't know if
She-
she
I don't think
voted, but
she
she
didn't.
technically kept her council seat, but she didn't receive double salary, she didn't
She
get her
became
council
mayor, but the
salary.
vacancy was there because the fact that, okay, it was a quick process. Joe left in May, former Mayor McLeany left in May, and, they were looking at the cost, and the election was in November. And she had the opportunity, if vacancy occurs in the last 2 years, you know how that goes.
Right.
And she would have not had to have the special election, and then council chose not to do it, why spend the money?
But there was an election in November of
There
that
wasn't
year.
a regular
And then for
election.
the unexpired term of 2 years,
Mhm.
and then the 2 years later, it was for the 4-year term.
Exactly, so there was that vacancy, and that was the controversial.
It's interesting that, it says, it says councilman, and then you discuss.
I know, just more, make it more generic.
Yeah, I just-
Serving as mayor shall have a vote in council until the date of the special election. That's, I don't know if people have issues with that or not.
I don't know that she has ever
It's just saying
exercised
it's
that.
done.
Oh, I know, but I mean, I think.
Oh,
it's
no,
an
I
issue.
don't disagree, I'm just saying.
It says that the mayor, the newly appointed mayor can also vote in council, that's pretty wild to me.
Okay, can I go on?
Well,
As long as you're talking about this and not talking about the zoning, we're gonna get to the
We're-
zoning
we're-
later.
Oh, okay, I'm going to something, go ahead.
Yeah,
Is it regarding the mayor?
confused.
Yes,
All right.
all right, it's under section 304A. to the charter.
Absence, okay.
When the mayor is absent now, what is absent? Is it when he can't communicate with a phone? Is he out of town? No offense, it has nothing to do with you, Don. If the mayor is on a boat trip and he can answer his phone from Hawaii, is he still the mayor? That, according to this, yes. Now, the reason I'm saying that is because when Don was gone a while and Mr. Molnar was acting mayor, I emailed him something, he sent me a nasty letter that Don is still the mayor, but he's acting. That is what I'm saying. When is a mayor absent, that the council president is acting mayor?
I think that's like splitting a little bit of hairs.
Pardon, Joe?
I think it's splitting a little hairs. I think the mayor is the mayor all the time, unless for some reason he's incapacitated, out of reach, out of touch, and you can't,
Unconscious.
and you can't get a hold of him. Then at that time, would then the president of the council step in, and who could then sign or make a decision on his behalf because he's unavailable.
But this is what I'm saying, Joe, I've been through this enough. If now use Don is gone, okay? Did he tell the council president, you are now acting mayor because I am not available? So if he's out of town, I'd have to call him on the phone if I want to talk to him, or do I call council president? And he said, oh no, you gotta that's when this has happened, Joe, I'm telling you. I want to know is when the mayor is not mayor anymore if he's on vacation, and when council president has the authority as mayor.
I think the council president only has authority of mayor if the mayor is absent from the municipality and or unable to perform his duties as mayor. So just because, right, is incapacitated, just because Mayor Kutka goes to see his granddaughter out near Cedar Point or his child out near Cedar Point, he's not, that doesn't mean he ain't mayor that day. That just means he's a telephone call away. Now, if, God forbid, he's, you know, in a hospital, unconscious, and, you know, got tubes down his throat, then that means the president is gonna have to act as the acting mayor. But if he's in the hospital for an ingrown toenail and he can be consulted by telephone, he's still the mayor as far as I'm concerned.
In the daily terms, does any of it make difference anymore with FaceTime and, I mean, when this was written, think of this as 40 years old.
Well, then the question may be, maybe we need to clarify it, is to say that, not that the mayor is absent from the municipality, but is for some reason unable to perform his duty as mayor. Maybe that makes more sense.
No, the reason I said that is Don is out of town, I want to get a hold of him. If I have his cell phone, I can talk to him, right?
Sure. If
All right.
if you'll answer.
All right, but that's what I'm saying is, if I went to the council president, I told you I got Nick Molnar's, I ain't the mayor, don't bother me. Well, you can't get a hold of Don, who's the mayor
That
then?
doesn't mean he's not the mayor, just because you can't get a hold of him.
I'm just telling you what the council president said in an email.
I think that maybe the language we need to add is that if the mayor would like to transfer, let's say the mayor does go on a 2-week worldwide cruise or something, and he or she doesn't want to have the responsibility of being mayor while they're on vacation, then they can transfer that power to the
That's
president
what I'm
of
saying,
council.
yes.
And that's a verbal transfer. Now, obviously, if they're ill and incapacitated, that becomes a different situation. But I think because of the technology we have today, I don't care where the mayor is. If he or she feels they can handle the duties, they're still the mayor.
Yeah.
As a sidebar, I'll add one, you know, as you know, clerks circulate questions. I got a conferencing in residents and council members at a meeting. Well, tell me. I mean, the whole point is to physically be present for the vote, but conferencing in, it's a different world. Now, would you use the word voluntarily transferring power? Would you?
That could, I mean, yeah, because you could, or let's say there was something that he needed to take a break from. and he wanted to transfer the power for a temporary situation, he could voluntarily do that for other reasons. And if the president of council was able to assume those duties, what difference would it make if he's in town? Really, if he.
I don't think the
No, I
mayor can just say, I don't wanna be mayor for a day or two, I'm gonna give it over to somebody else. I don't think a mayor would ever do that.
Well, I don't know, but why couldn't he?
Not normally, no,
No, but-
I think though, if he was incapacitated, or if he was knowing that he was like, let's say he was going to Europe or something, and he couldn't have communication for some reason. Then, but you know, all the time while I was mayor, I can say that the president of council, I would confer with and make sure that they understood what it was that I was doing, and I was going to be absent. I had no problem with that authority shift, that they would take control at that point in time.
Right.
And if I couldn't be contacted, then that's what would happen.
But I mean, for example, with Barb, several years ago, she went to Tahiti, but she had a phone.
Yeah, I mean,
She was
today-
calling all the way from Tahiti.
I think you need to consider that was great that everything went well and nothing transpired while she was in Tahiti. But God forbid, if there is something that occurs within our city that requires somebody leading to be here, mayor, for example, 9/11 comes to mind. Okay, somebody that has to take charge of what's going on. And if our mayor's in Tahiti, I don't think it's appropriate that someone try to do that by cell phone. We need somebody here in charge, taking responsibility for handling things.
Well, but that's a process, as opposed to what you're in a sense trying to say then is that you wanna write some charter language change that would.
No, I like exactly what you said.
Okay.
I do. What you said, I think if things were working properly, that's what would be going on, but I think right now they're a little dysfunctional and they're not happening that way.
So are you suggesting, Joe, that maybe if this is an area where there's change, it would be a legislative change to make an ordinance to deal with it? It seems to me, and not a charter.
No, it couldn't be an ordinance.
Oh, okay.
It would either have to be a charter, because yeah, and it can't be, I don't think, legislation.
Your charter's your constitution, and that's really your.
I mean, you would have, the person that's in that seat would have to rely on what's written here in this Bible. So, as council members as well, you have to know what it is that your duties are. And you can't certainly write something in there that, or have somebody make a change by council or by any other action that would change that.
You know, I think Mr. Nostine mentioned something earlier, and I was thinking about like these little nuances and changes. The general public gets very confused at the ballot with these, changes which cannot be explained, very well, particularly ballot language. While this may not be a case in point, you will see throughout the charter, the word village. In almost every charter review commission we've talked about, that word village is still in here when Macedonia was a village. So why aren't we cleaning that up? We can't just arbitrarily clean it up. Strangely as that sounds, you can't arbitrarily do that. And they say, well, we should be put on the ballot. Well, then the voter gets, I hate to sound like it's demeaning, and that they're not intelligent to figure that out, then that becomes confusing. You just want to clean it up, so it's consistent. But that's the reason why that word village pops up in a couple of paragraphs, and you say, really? Can I just change it? Because certainly I thought